Hopefully this is.
Is this any better?
Yeah, this seems to be okay.
Okay. Yeah, we can hear you.
All right, perfect.
Okay. So we're going to ask you some questions. I'm going to be taking some notes, so ignore soft typing sounds.
Okay.
Why are you interested in a lab manager position?
Well, I'm interested in a lab manager position because I'm looking to get published. I want to work with children I don't really know what area yet, but I've been in 5 different labs, and from the experiences, I've realized that I enjoy working with the children the best. I enjoy the literature the most, so I'm looking towards this experience, towards that. The other reason is I'm very interested in vocalics and acoustic analysis, so I started to get involved in that in the testosterone project when I integrated Pratt into our protocol. So with social anxiety in individuals, there's a link between high fundamental frequency and a variety of other cues that we're seeing whether or not the effects of our hormonal treatment affects that. But I'm interested in just having a better understanding of the auditory domain in this realm.
What is your long-term goals? What do you want to do?
My long-term goal is graduate school. I'm not sure what specific field yet, if it should be in audiology, if it should be in developmental psychology or developmental neuroscience, but I know I want to deal with children, and I know I want to deal with perception.
You've been in a bunch of different labs.
Yes.
And you've probably seen a lot of different types of lab settings. I'm assuming they're all run in different ways structurally. What do you think are the most important skills that a lab manager can possess in general?
The top 3 are organization, organization, and organization. The key to being an effective lab manager, from what I've seen, is to really be very detail-oriented and to come with it from a professional attitude. On the same line, it's really important with dealing with RAs and with help and with community to make sure that you're able to, even if you're stressed out, you need to seem like you're calm, collected, happy, and keep a good impression for the lab.
And what would you say are your top 3 qualities that you can bring to being a lab manager?
Okay, the top 3 qualities I can bring is 1, organization. I've been in a variety of different labs, and in the labs I've always taken initiative to run independent projects. I've run my own independent project in Dr. Woolley's. I'm currently running an FDA testosterone administration study, managing it. I'm not first offer on that. I'm first offer on the Facebook study in Dr. Woolley's lab. My second quality I can bring is I'm very fast learning in terms of technical knowledge. In all the labs that I've been in, I've integrated some of my experience from film. For example, in the anxiety labs, I made unique video footage for all the PTSD soldiers. I made manuals to use every bit of software that's being used in the lab. I made instructional videos for all the protocols for pretty much all the studies at this point. I can make things be very regimented and consistent by using some of these skills. The third ability I have is I kind of think outside the box due to my kind of hodgepodge of experiences and my background in film. So I've been able to increase recruitment in our lab due to that. So in our lab, when I say our lab, that could mean 3 different things. So in the anxiety lab, I increased recruitment through the use of Facebook advertisement, subreddit groups specifically targeting PTSD patients. And in terms of the Woolley lab, I increased recruitment by getting us involved with community organizations. So not just in terms of local schools, but also like the JCC, the Jewish Community Center. A lot of the parents there have been actively involved in that. So main skills I give is organization, passion, and creativity.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Okay. So I can see that a lot of your work is with clinical populations. Is that the track that you're planning on taking, and then that you're thinking about for the future? And then my sort of follow-up question is, do you have any experience working with linguistics in non-clinical populations?
Okay, so to answer the first question, until recently, that what I was looking in terms of clinical schools, but recently I had like last year in terms of my work on the Facebook study, and just in terms of when I went to ADAA and saw the various kind of different types of research findings there were, I realized that I'm interested in things beyond clinical. So that's one of the reasons I'm kind of stretching myself out to see things I haven't done before. In terms of linguistics, not directly with non-clinical populations, but I've like dealt with using Luke for a PTSD study. So, and in terms of the in Dr. Rebecca Neal Beavers, I dealt with children with autism as well in my brief time in that lab as well.
We do studies with a wide range of ages. We do work with adults, but we also do work all the way down to really young infants, down to like 4 months. What kinds of experiences have you had working with these really, really young children in general?
So in general, the primary wealth experience I have is for family members, but I've also dealt with that range in my time in Rebecca Neal Beaver's lab, since that was primarily dealing with infants that were at risk for autism and looking in terms of whether gaze sharing could be used as an early marker of autism. In addition to that, in terms of my classes, I did an HDF class to get more experience where you spend the entire time at the preschool on campus coding children's behavior. So while I may not have like a lot of experience doing babysitting or running a daycare, I do have experience dealing with that age range, and I have the skills I've used for slightly older, I think, are somewhat applicable towards that age range as well, in terms of being very expressive, being very attentive, and yeah.
You're thinking about going on into, particularly working with kids. What do you like most about that population?
Well, I've kind of liked kids my entire life. Like in my background in film, most of my work was dealing with children, so I did documentaries on kids. My thesis film was a short film about a kid whose monster in a closet basically wants to break up with him. So I've just been something I've always been interested in. I guess if I had to peel apart the layers and say, like, why do I like children? I think it's because I'm always kind of surprised by the reactions. Like in Dr. Woolley's lab, we ran a study on miracles, and one of the kids said he didn't believe in God, but he believed in Batman. So it's interesting just to see how the logical processes form at a young age. And at the end of the day, I know whatever I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be working like 18 hours a day at the minimum, and I want it to be something that I'm happy about at all times. And I just seem to enjoy this.
So you mentioned some of your interest in something like a lab manager position is in terms of publications and doing research, but a lot of your time's also going to be spent organizing undergrads, working with them, kind of overseeing their progress. So I'm wondering whether you have any experiences organizing undergrads or organizing kind of age-matched peers, working with that, trying to get them stuff.
Yes. So in my research experience and running the FDA study, I'm managing a team of about 6 RAs, and it's been a real pleasure not only just to teach them the protocol, especially because a lot of them have initially been spider phobic, so getting them across that level sometimes a struggle, but really kind of going under the true methodology and underpinnings of the study of, the neural and ecological basis of this. Outside of my research experience, I headed a film festival at UT where I organized about 7 students and making about 100 cold calls a day to try to get people to come in to judge our festival for free. I've had experiences with that. I was the PR manager for my honors fraternity. So I've had good experiences managing people, especially with a film. I also ran a television show that won our regionals teleconference. But short answer is yes. I've been lucky.
Obviously, I'm assuming AV equipment is going to be something you're very, very comfortable with.
Yeah.
What about kind of troubleshooting things on the spot? Not just AV, but just equipment in general.
Yeah. I mean, the film has taught me the perfect skills for that, because if you ever been on a film shoot, everything goes wrong. And the key is to be able to kind of adjust it. There's been times when we've had to jerry-rig things to go on. One example, in the autism lab, the camera setup was screwed up, so it wasn't recording directly to the computer. So I set up a screen capture, so we were able to still get the footage for that day with the participants. I've been able to do it and kind of outside of that as well. On this current testosterone study, we have a speech phobia paradigm as well, which if you know about that, you need a whole bunch of audience members, which is hard to do. And it turned out we weren't going to have the numbers to do that. So I created a unique one where they think they're talking to people, but it's a fake Skype call. So it's consistent and it can be run by one RA, which is pretty efficient in terms of that. I've also programmed, I taught myself a little bit of Java to do the task on the Woolley lab. So basically, whatever task I've had, I've learned skills to do it. So I feel confident in that.
So imagine you're in the lab and a student comes in, says that there's some problem with the equipment, and there's a parent waiting. Kind of what would be your first steps? What would you do?
The first step I would tell the student to calm down. I would go and talk to the parent initially to let them know that everything's going well. We're just going to take a little while and make sure they don't have anything pressing that they have to get to. I would then go and check up on the equipment. I'll tell the student to go back, wait with the parent and wait with the child. And then hopefully we get it figured out. But within 10 minutes, if we don't figure it out, I'd let the parent know and ask them if they wanted to reschedule, because I don't want to send the wrong message to the parent and have them wait 30 minutes and, oh, maybe it's ready, maybe it's not.
So a big part of being a lab manager is really teaching and training students and giving them feedback.
Yeah.
Because they're going to make mistakes, they're learning. So I was hoping you could discuss a time when a student was really struggling with something, or they were making the same mistake over and over again. Preferably if you could talk about in your lab experience, and then how you handled it.
Okay. Let me give me a second to think about this. Okay. So specifically in the testosterone study, we had one student that was particularly afraid of spiders, but she didn't let any of us know. But I could just tell whenever she was dealing with it. So what I did with her is I set her after the meeting and asked if she could stay behind. And I talked to her, it's like, do we want to just kind of get through this? And I spent around 2 hours just kind of running a private exposure session with her to try to get her through it in terms of that.
This is one of your RAs?
Yes. Magna.
We talked earlier about kind of the skills that you thought of as being both needed for a lab manager position and kind of the top things you could bring. What would you say is your greatest weakness, or the thing you'd most have to work on?
So I guess spiders, I don't know. So in terms of before I did the testosterone study, I was terrified of spiders, beginning it. So with what my problems are in terms of specific things, I get myself through it. I've had less experience working directly with infants, but I've had the experience through class and through lab work, and I feel very competent in doing it.
What questions do you have for us?
Yeah, I guess one thing I wanted to ask is what do you see the lab's future going towards? The lab's you've had a lot of different studies in terms of looking in terms of the effects of bilingualism, in terms of noise detection, and in terms of way back in the past in terms of autism. Where do you see the future of the lab?
Well, the main topic that the lab has been focused on long term is this issue about ability to listen and noise. And that's what this grant is on.
Yeah.
So that's sort of
yeah,
the kind of the primary issue is about how background noise affects individuals at different ages, and how that changes as language develops and as attentional skills develop. But the lab has also always been one where students could develop their own projects. Yeah. And so it tends to kind of go in different places over time, depending upon who's in the lab at that moment.
So for example, my first study coming to campus was an aging study, which I don't think you typically associate with the language development lab.
That is true.
But yeah, so it's a lot of it's quite a bit up to the students, the people who are in the lab, kind of driving the directions it goes.
Okay. Or at least, if not the main direction, the
particular focus within
a number of the different studies. There's kind of always some basic lab studies, and then there's also the studies that are perhaps a little further afield and are driven by the students, and that kind of shifts.
Huh.
What else?
I guess in terms of so in the lab manager position, would I be primarily running a study and assisting students, or would I be helping with a variety of studies? What do you see, I guess, mainly for you, like what's in this lab, what's a typical day as a lab manager like?
You might be better able to answer that.
Okay, so...
Although none of us can answer that.
There's not a typical day. That's not a joke, that's totally serious. Each day is different, each week is different. Like, there are a large variety of tasks that I can tell you about, so there is a lot of administrative work. Just making like IRB things are in order, paperwork stuff, all of that kind of jazz. There's a lot of, like in the beginning of the semester, I would say half of my time for 4 weeks is spent training students.
Yeah.
So obviously that's a lot of time, but that's also only for like a limited time period. I have also developed my own study, so some of my time is spent, I did all of the background research for that, as well as setting the study up and administering it, and I'll be looking at the data soon. So like there's that aspect. Obviously, since I have to train people in all the aspects of the lab, I can do all the aspects of the lab. So I do sometimes run studies or am babysitting siblings, but that's really kind of as a last resort, because that's something that like the undergrads can do.
Yeah.
So at the level of like what undergrads can do, I let them do that, and I kind of do the higher level of stuff that the lab requires.
It certainly is not the case that you would be working only on one study. The lab has lots of different things going on at once. Perfect. And I sort of see the lab manager position as being the person who's kind of
troubleshooting,
making sure things work. And that will mean, both making sure we have whatever supplies are on hand, and making, training the students in the lab, and filling in whenever there's a gap in the schedule, someone's sick or someone's whatever happens, and kind of more global organization and planning stuff, making stimuli for studies that are new, passing tasks on to appropriate undergrads and identifying who can do what. So lots of different things.
Some of it too is also working with some of the more advanced students in the lab. So Amrita and I as PhD students, and some of the master's students are kind of in charge of running certain studies or coordinating things specifically related to those. So we take charge of a lot of the day-to-day kind of running of the studies, but it might be useful, I might coordinate with Chantal to make sure I'm not taking out RAs at a time that's inconvenient for the rest of the lab's business, or I'm training in students and I know which students are the ones who are going to be kind of helpful to train in and things like that. So a lot of it too is kind of interfacing with the more senior students of the lab who might be running studies of their own.
So it seems that the way that and I'm getting a bit of an echo. So the way that the RAs are run in this lab seems more similar to my experiences at the Woolley lab, that the RAs help with a variety of studies, as opposed to some of the work in other labs where the RA's been linked to just, they have to stay with one study, they can only work on one study. Is that correct?
Initially, yes. We kind of work more on a breadth approach. So students who are new to the lab kind of are in the lab in general, and they might be in certain hours, and during those hours they might work on whatever study at that time is most pressing. So if there's an adult scheduled, and then a 2-year-old scheduled, and then phone calling that needs to be done for an infant study, they might do all of those. As students are more advanced, then they can do independent projects where they really have their project that they're seeing through. But that's, in this lab, more of the advanced rather than being the entryway.
Okay, perfect.
Also, a lot of our experiments are run on a similar interface. So when you're trained as a beginning RA, you're trained to run a type of experiment, and that type can be several different experiments, but they follow a similar paradigm.
Right, good point, yeah. We may have a dozen different studies running, but we don't have a dozen
protocols,
paradigms, because a lot of them are using the same structure, even if it's different sounds, different videos. So.
Excellent.
I guess I was also wondering, out of the studies we do in the lab and the topics that we focus on, which one interests you the most?
I guess what interests me the most, I was really surprised with that you found that infants are less distracted by multiple talkers than it was individual talkers. So I'm just interested in terms of what range, because how do you go and translate that in terms of changes in a preschool, or changes in terms of better able to make better environments for children to be able to learn when we have
most of the work that's been done on schools and measuring noise in schools, and certainly all of the work on kind of requirements for noise levels in schools, are all based on unoccupied classrooms. So it's all about the noise from the HVAC and the noise from the traffic outside, and not about the noise caused by the other kids, which, especially with young kids, is somewhat substantial. So thinking about the kinds of noises that are actually experienced is really relevant to thinking about how to make the classroom setting different. Another issue that relates to that is that, to the extent that younger children versus older children are differently affected by types of noise, that also may change how you want to set up which classes are in which rooms. That is, people set up the classrooms based upon, we go first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, whatever. Usually in some kind of system based upon going from youngest to oldest, not, the older kids can be closer to the HVAC, or the older kids can be closer to their classroom could be more on the corner where there's more traffic noise, and the younger kids should be more in the room that's not near X. So there are those types of approaches as well, in terms of not how you build the building, but how you assign who's where within it.
Excellent. Yeah.
Do you have other questions for us?
I guess that's pretty much it. The one thing that I'm very interested, I guess, maybe relevant of something that I might be interested in looking at, if there's time independently, is I'm really interested in the effects of gender in terms of like infants' response. So specifically in terms of parsing apart gender to look at fundamental frequency, since previous studies have shown that like gender has been a useful thing for children to kind of distinguish between noise in the background. Whether or not it's due to the actual other tonalities, or whether it could be parsed away between whether speaking in a higher voice or speaking in a lower voice or speaking.
In terms of the target speaker, or more in terms of the, or in terms of distractors? No,
in terms of target speaker, and in terms of like, if the target speaker is able to maintain a higher frequency than the distractors, does that increase attention? Is there a variety of things to do it? Might change it on? Is there other aspects that can be shifted to make someone a more effective communicator that's easily teachable to people?
I suspect it depends upon not so much anything in an absolute sense, but more how that voice compares to what's around them. But that's not obvious. So there's been some suggestion, for example, that the way that we typically talk to infants in that more sing-songy voice, that one of its advantages might be that not everyone else is talking that way. That it sets that voice apart from the other voices in the background. And it may not be that it's necessarily better inherently, but just that the fact that there's a distinction makes it easier to separate things. So if everyone else talked infant directed, then talking adult directed would be, in that setting, better. And likewise, then if you're in a room full of kids, talking in a low voice might be better than talking with another high-pitched voice. Whereas in a setting full of adults, that might be just the opposite. But I don't think that's definitely known for certain. What's your time frame that you're looking for? Like, you said you were looking eventually to go into grad school. You weren't entirely sure exactly where, or in what. But kind of what's your time frame that you're looking to be a lab manager for?
Probably 2 years if it's only 1 year. So it seems like that's the amount of time to get experience and to be able to get, established.
Are you thinking that you would then be ready to apply to grad school in, well, if it was 1 year, then in a few months, or for 2 years, in a year and a half?
Yeah, in a year and a half, I should be able to. I've got a large amount of experiences, and the other project should kind of, on the project I'm currently working will lead to a publication as well. So.
Okay. Well, I said half an hour, and I think we're probably at that point. So unless anyone has any last-minute questions, I guess not. We're looking to probably make our decision this week, or if the latest by early next week. So you'll be hearing back from us soon.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.